Hi, everyone. It's nice to see you again. I'm Harmony Defoe with Publishers Weekly, and welcome to Books on Tap Live. Today, we're talking to Dr. Roizen and Dr. Crupain, authors of the What to Eat When cookbook. This event is sponsored by National Geographic, and don't forget we're giving away a limited number of copies of the cookbook, along with the groundbreaking What to Eat When guide. Enter to win by going to publishersweekly.com/what-to-eat. We've also dropped a link to the page in the comments section on Facebook and YouTube. And as always, during the event, audience members can ask questions by writing them in the comments section on Facebook and YouTube. And we'll try to answer as many questions as possible after the interview. Finally, if you'd like to receive notifications of future events, sign up at publishersweekly.com/booksontap-live. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our wonderful guests, Dr. Roizen and Dr. Crupain.
Thank you, Harmony.
Yes, absolutely. Nice to meet you guys. Nice to see you again. Lovely.
Great to be here with you.
So I was wondering, first of all, what are you guys drinking today for Books on Tap Live? I have a water. Would you like to share your beverages?
Well, I have 3 beverages because I messed up. So I have coffee, which is healthy. I have red wine, which I brought to drink at least during the last 15 minutes, but I forgot an opener. So I quickly ran away and found one with a screw cap. So it's a New Zealand wine that my wife likes called Love Walk. But I really intended to have the red wine.
Excellent. And Dr. C, are you drinking anything today?
No, just water for me since Mike has so many beverages. I'm keeping it simple.
Cheers to that. Okay, so we wanted to know a little bit about you guys. Can you tell us a little bit about your backgrounds and what you do and where you're from?
You want to start, Michael, or you want me to?
You start, Mike.
So 17 years in Buffalo, New York, I grew up. I actually admired the Cleveland Indians and got to go to the some of the games in 1954 when they last won. Well, they didn't win the World Series then. They got into the World Series then. 17 years in San Francisco. During the Vietnam War, I was lucky enough to compete for what is called the Yellow Beret, which was 3 years at National Institute of Health in the public health service, where I learned a lot about science. 17 years at the UC San Francisco. I don't know if I said that. Part of that was on the faculty after the time at NIH. 17 years in Chicago at the University of Chicago as chair of anesthesia, critical care, pain management, and started executive health there as well. A couple years in Syracuse and now 15 in Cleveland as chair initially of anesthesia, critical care, pain management, and executive health. And then we started a wellness institute, and I got to direct that for the first, I think, 13 years of it. I also have a son. I have a wife who's a wonderful physician at our crosstown rival, the University Hospitals in Case Western Reserve in Cleveland. And a son who is a pediatric endocrinologist at CHOP in Philadelphia, a daughter who teaches organic chemistry at Duke. And my major mission, if you will, is to help people change behavior so they can live longer, younger, by understanding how easy it is to change behavior. You got more than I can say, Harmony.
Excellent. That was great. Thank you. And Dr. C, how about you?
So I grew up in New York and New Jersey, and I went to college down in North Carolina. Then came back to New York Medical College for medical school. I thought I wanted to be a neurosurgeon. I did 2 years of neurosurgery residency before I decided it wasn't for me. I ended up joining a little startup company and then followed a path to preventive medicine, which is a public health specialty, which I did my job working at Consumer Reports, where I ran the food safety testing program. I love food. I love cooking. Really interested in policy. My mission is to make the world a healthier place. And so that's how I saw doing that through food, nutrition, agriculture, and the media. after I was at Consumer Reports for about 3 years. I got a call from Dr. Mehmet Oz, who asked me to come run the medical unit at the Dr. Oz show. So I do that, where I make sure what we say on the show is accurate. And while I was there, I met Mike Roizen, and we decided to write What to Eat When, because we were so interested in working together and doing something that could help people.
Well, also, What to Eat When, the science was really getting to be substantial, and that's why we decided to write What to Eat When, to share that, if you will, the science of, if you will, that the when is as important as the what, and they're both obviously important.
Well, thank you guys. It's nice to have you here. And talking about the What to Eat When original guide, what really inspired you to write the cookbook and to follow it up with specifically this cookbook, and what makes this cookbook special to you?
I think there are a lot of things. As Mike said, we were really interested in the science of when. So I was always interested in when you eat. And when I was a neurosurgery resident, I used to do intermittent fasting, but then I didn't know what it was. And I followed the science, and we became really interested that it was sort of started in animals. Then there was a lot of animal data, and then there was some human data. And we thought it was really compelling to write that first book. The second book, the What to Eat When cookbook, which just came out, really came out of a couple of things. So one was a lot of people started asking us for recipes after we wrote the first book. That was actually the most requested thing that people asked for. So we wanted to do that. And then, one of the things that we see a lot of people doing is intermittent fasting has become a fad. Now, our sort of way of looking at the world is more than just intermittent fasting. It's about eating with your circadian rhythm. But a lot of people are intermittent fasting and focusing on when they eat more now, which we're really excited about. But you still also have to focus on the what. You've got to match the what with the when. And so we wanted to write this book to help people see the science of both the what and the when, so they could do it right.
And I think to make it easy to follow the guidelines of, if you will, what we call the 10 commandments of what to eat when, which is you want to eat with the sun. And he's right back here to remind me of that. You want to eat more early, less later. You don't want to stereotype food. Mistakes shouldn't derail you. And the key point of all, probably, is food is a relationship. So just as you wouldn't marry someone who's trying to kill you, you shouldn't eat food that's trying to kill you. You should eat food you love and that loves you back. And that's the key of every recipe in the book. All 100 and actually, I think there are 137 with the salmon burger recipes. But the point of it is that every recipe has food in it, is only contained with food that loves your body back and the taste you can love. So Mike and our third author, Jim Perko, who's the executive chef at the Cleveland Clinic, are the ones who created the recipes. I got to recreate them. That is to prove that that an amateur could cook them in 30 minutes. And there's a lot of technique information in the book as well, so that even I can learn how to do it. And I got to eat them, obviously. And so I can tell you that every one, in other words, we threw out the ones that didn't taste great repeatedly.
And I think let me add one thing to something Mike said about making food that you love. I think that's really important, and that loves you back, obviously, is also important. But when we were writing this book, the What to Eat When cookbook, it was so important to us that it wasn't like a diet cookbook or a healthy cookbook that you would want to pass up. That there was a cookbook filled with delicious things that you would want to make all the time. They weren't too hard. That also happened to help you eat the when way.
Absolutely, I agree. Even when I was reading the cookbook, it didn't feel like any kind of, dietary cookbook. It was just kind of like fun recipes that were also delicious, that also happened to be involved with the philosophy that you guys are.
You're showing one of my favorite dishes for eating. If I don't eat a salmon burger in the morning, I try and get this. These are Peruvian potatoes cut 1 inch. I learned that if you cut things finer, and maybe every cook knows this, but I didn't know it. If you cut things finer, like salmon or potatoes, you get more surface area, more seasoning, more taste in it. So these are cut about 1 inch, and then they're seasoned with whatever your favorite seasons are. This has probably, as I remember it, garlic and salt, and I can't remember everything that I put on it, parsley, but it is it is really tasty. And one of the keys in that is when you eat a starch cold in the morning. So cook these in the afternoon. We put them in the refrigerator here, and then 10:30 or 11 in the morning when I normally eat. If I don't have a salmon burger at home, I have different foods on the weekend. But at work, I'll have either salmon burger or something like this. So when you cool starch, starch becomes sugar when warm, meaning it breaks apart easy. But when it's cold, it becomes resistant to breaking apart. So it acts more like fiber than something that is a starch that gives you too much blood sugar. So that's why I love this picture. You can probably tell from my coffee cup. I don't know if you can see because it's worn out, but I love purple. My pens are purple, so these are really Peruvian purple potatoes.
Yeah, Mike does love purple.
They really are beautiful, aren't they? I noticed the book centers around this concept of the Wen way, and I wondered if you could talk about the concept of chrononutrition and eating at certain times of day. It was a thread throughout the book and the most important part, so I wanted to see how you wanted to break that down for our audience.
Yeah,
looks like the other Mike is going to answer this one.
Yeah, let me take that one. Mike gave you a little preview of that, but I'll start from the beginning. It really has to do with your circadian rhythm, and your circadian rhythm is your body's clock. And its job is to get your body ready to do the right thing at the right time. And we all know a little bit about our circadian rhythm when we think about jet lag, and we think we've gone to a different time zone and now we're tired and exhausted, and the sun is rising at a different time, and the sun actually sets our circadian rhythm. So that's why we get all out of whack. So our circadian rhythm actually affects all of our body's system. It affects our skin, affects our heart, our blood vessels, but including our metabolism. So our metabolism actually changes throughout the day. And our metabolism is designed so that it's most efficient to do certain things at certain times. So it's actually, our body wants us to eat while the sun is up and fast while the sun is set. So while we're supposed to be sleeping, we shouldn't be eating. It's one of the one good things we haven't figured out yet, how to do eat while we're sleeping. So that's good. And we also want to eat more early and less later. So research suggests that if we eat more of our calories before 3 p.m. then after 3 p.m., that's better for us. And in fact, a calorie we eat earlier in the day may not count as much as one we eat later in the day. And so that's why the sort of two main principles of eating the Wen way are eat with the sun and eat more early and less later. And then the third principle is don't stereotype food. That's because we're basically telling you if you're eating more early and less later, we're saying eat your dinner for breakfast, right? We don't want you eating sugary cereals and pastries for breakfast, right? We want you eating real food. So we want you eating things like Mike's salmon burger or Peruvian potatoes or any other vegetable dish or fish dish. It's okay to eat it earlier in the day. It doesn't have to be a dinner food. So that's another reason we wrote the new What to Eat When cookbook, is to give people those recipes for how they can eat healthy foods any time of day.
I loved that concept, and I saw there was a page that said you should be meal agnostic, and I loved that. It's kind of like you could eat any time of day, have breakfast for dinner, dinner for breakfast, lunch for breakfast, whatever you want. So I thought that was really interesting. And
yeah.
What you guys
and
think?
let me just
Go ahead.
say, culturally, right? In some cultures, it'd be normal to eat fish for breakfast. Like in Japan, they wouldn't think twice about it. We think, oh, salmon for breakfast, that sounds strange, but it's not because of our biology, it's a cultural thing. So we're saying it's okay to do that because it's actually good for your biology.
And that goes back to it's kind of a lifestyle choice, So I wanted to know, how do you guys think that this lifestyle can affect your overall life in terms of aging gracefully and things like that?
Well, let me take that, if you will. So the real thing about intermittent fasting, that is doing 18 hours without food and 6 hours with, or 16 and 8, which are common. And people call anything intermittent fasting, skipping for 2 days, skipping for 4 hours, whatever. But the science of it is that if you get ketotic, which really means about 16 hours for most people of no food. And you can get that by stopping eating at, say, 7 p.m. and not eating again till whatever, 12 and 4. So it would be about 11 a.m., which is my normal time. So I'll normally have my first meal of the day at about 11 a.m. and I finish by 7 p.m. By doing it that way, what happens is you switch which of your genes are on and which are not on. So there's a little science here, and I hope not to get too heavy here, but when the Human Genome Project started, we had enough DNA in our cells for 300,000 genes, but we only had 22,500. And they said, what's the rest? And they called it junk DNA in 2001. But in 2009, they found out it was epigenetic switches. It is switches that control your genes, and you get to control those by your habits, one of which is when you get ketotic, you switch on repair and survival genes. And then when you eat again, you switch on growth genes. And what that showed is within 4 days of doing this, these are some really good studies in humans, within 4 days of doing this, you switch on every one of the anti-aging processes that we know about. You start to change your biomarkers towards less inflammation and, if you will, a anti-aging process. You also change some of the actual things, such as the proteins you make, towards healthier proteins. That's all within 4 days. And from a clinical standpoint, what happens? You stop being as hungry at night, you feel more energy, and you sleep better. So sleeping better, feeling more energy, those are all good things. And that's what happens when you go on the appropriate, what we call Wen way, which is eating only when the sun is out, eating more before 2 p.m., less after 3 p.m. Now, Michael Crupain, Dr. Crupain alluded to the fact that when you eat more early as compared to eating that same amount later, you lose weight, because a calorie, although a calorie is a calorie in the test tube, a calorie in the morning seems to be less of a calorie than a calorie in the evening. And in the number of studies, but my favorite is the Spanish study of women who were overweight. When they ate the same exact number of calories, but ate them in the morning as opposed to evening, they lost 25% more weight. So there's some really solid data, and I'm sorry to get in the roots of science.
Let me add something to what Mike said, which is, he said a word that a lot of people are familiar with, right? About getting into ketosis, right? So a lot of people are into a keto diet and being in ketosis all the time. What's really cool about eating the Wen way is it's possible to get into ketosis if you do it right. So the thing here is, as Mike said, when you eat more early, your body actually likes burning carbohydrates during the day and burning fat at night. Carbohydrates or sugars are sort of body's favorite source of energy, and fat is one of its best storage forms of energy. So during that fast, it looks to go to the storage form. And so if you eat your carbohydrates early and you can burn through them throughout the day, then when you're sort of towards the end of your fast at night, you can get into that ketosis, burning fat. Not everybody can. You can measure it if you want. But the cool thing is there's something, as Mike was alluding to, about switching fuel. So going from carbohydrates to ketones and back and forth seems to activate those protective mechanisms Mike was talking about. And it's not just being in one or the other all the time. It's that switch, which is the key.
That's great. I think because this is it's a cookbook, but it's also kind of a lifestyle book, I think that it could also be really great for reading circles and book clubs and things like that. And I wanted to know, how would you consider integrating this into something like that?
Right. That's exactly right. Because what it does is it allows you to live longer, younger, which means you can have more time for your passions, more time for the purpose in life. And so, I mean, even just going around the room for what are your passions? Why are you doing this? What are you going to do with the extra time you have? Are you can you keep up with your grandkids? So all of these things, I mean, if you will, this is really a way of both having fun cooking and even the cooking techniques. So as you said, we spend Chef Perko insisted we have a large section in there on techniques so that amateurs like myself could make the food taste as great as he made it taste, or as Dr. Crupain, who's a real pro chef, also made it taste. And so that's part of the joy is learning the new techniques. And in fact, one of the things we did on if you will, at least at my house, we invited, and this is pre-COVID while we were writing this, we invited everyone over to bring a red dish as a breakfast dish that was healthy. So you can have a group bring something that is out of the book or even not out of the book, but that is absolutely healthy and that tastes great and that's their favorite breakfast food for an 11 a.m. or something, brunch on a Saturday or Sunday. So you can do that and have fun with it, and in a book club that way, as well as the discussion of what you're going to do with your extra time.
That's great. And I also noticed, this is kind of an ad hoc question that I had from the intro, that you guys have categories of what are yes foods and what are no foods. Can you talk about that a little bit, and what makes a yes food, what makes a no food a no food?
Mike, do you want to do that?
Sure. I thought
yeah. I can do it.
I'll start. I'll talk about the yes foods, and you'll talk about the no foods. But I'm glad you asked us about that from the beginning of the book. We did an interview last week where the first question was about the acknowledgments of the book, which I was very impressed that they had dove in so deeply. But the yes foods, we really are big fans of a Mediterranean style diet. So a plant-based diet, so plant forward. So basically everything on the yes food list is a plant. We also love healthy fats, so olive oil, avocados, any type of source of healthy fat. We love fish, especially fish filled with healthy fat. Salmon is Mike's favorite food. That's there. Also, nuts like walnuts filled with healthy fats. So those are all the things you'll find on the yes list because they're all really, really good for you and foods that people don't necessarily eat enough of. Now, for the no list, I'll let Mike talk about that.
Well, so the only thing on the no list are what we call the 5 food felons, one of which the U.S. government has outlawed. So I really probably don't have to go into that. That's foods with trans fat. Trans fat is a toxin to your cells. So it's often in fried food, but the U.S. government has banned it as a additive. It used to be an additive as a preservative. I even have a pack of something with raisins in it that has trans fat to preserve it. If you put trans fat around something, you can probably keep it for about 10 years. But it's a toxin to your cells. So one is food with trans fat. The second thing is food with simple sugars, added syrups, and simple carbohydrates. Why? Those 3 things raise your blood sugar too fast. So foods with those are what we would call no foods. And then the other is foods with saturated fat, not because of the saturated fat, but they come with amino acids, choline, lecithin, and carnitine, that change the bacteria in your gut. Now, you can actually get a microbiome analysis because it only changes the bacteria in about 85% of us. About 15% of us don't have that. But in the 85, the vast majority of Americans, those foods such as red meat or processed red meat, and foods with lecithin and choline such as egg yolks, egg whites are fine, but those things select bacteria. That is some bacteria love carnitine. And so they prosper when you have carnitine, and they create a protein called trimethylamine as their waste product from metabolizing the carnitine. Doesn't sound good, but that's how we absorb food. It's what the bacteria process. We absorb their waste product, the trimethylamine gets in, we convert it to trimethylamine oxide, and it causes inflammation. It is a stronger cause of heart disease than is an LDL cholesterol of 250. There isn't a doc who wouldn't treat an LDL of 250. That's what more than 4 ounces of red meat does to you in a week. They also increase dementia and cancer risk by that same mechanism. So that's why we say avoid the foods with saturated fat. It's not because of the saturated fat. It's because that red meat and processed red meat come with the proteins and egg yolks, etc., come with amino acids that change the bacteria inside you. So as you can tell, although Mike is as good at explaining the science as I am, he wants me to explain the science because that's tougher for people and they turn off with it.
Well, thank you very much, both of you, for your explanations. Those were great. Thank you. So we have a few more minutes before the Q&A, and
as you can tell, we tried to I tried to put as much humor in the book as possible. One of the goals in writing the book is as I don't know if you noticed, there's a note on each recipe, and a lot of those have subtle and sometimes not so subtle humor in them in an attempt to have people enjoy the book and even reading the recipes, even if they don't cook them.
Absolutely. There were a lot of fun puns and plays on words that I really enjoyed. So that was great. What are each of your favorite recipes from the book? If you had to choose one each, what's your favorite recipe?
Oh, only one?
Or if we have time, we could do two, but one for now.
My favorite is the salmon burger. It's easy.
So
there's three varieties of salmon burgers, but my favorite is salmon burger because I love salmon burgers.
And now the salmon burger is a very interesting topic because Mike loves salmon, as I said before, and Mike eats salmon burgers every day almost.
I'm going to run and show you. I saved my lunch today.
Yeah, Mike will be back in a second. If you open Mike's freezer that he has in his house, his extra freezer, a huge freezer, it's literally nothing but salmon burgers. So
I don't know if you can see this. These are salmon burgers. This is broccoli, and this is the farro with leftover pasta. I should get the fork out of here. So these are three of my favorite foods. I'm not seeing them very well, but there they are. That's the salmon burger, the farro, and the broccoli. And one of the techniques on broccoli is to have it really crisp. And Jim does that, or taught me how to do it by drying it on paper rather than shocking it in water.
So in the book, we have 3 salmon burger recipes. I created one with a wild salmon that's made completely from scratch. Jim created another wild salmon burger, also made completely from scratch. And Mike also gave us his salmon burger recipe, which is a salmon burger from Costco that he heats up. He heats up in the pan. He eats it cold. He eats it hot. But listen, if you want salmon burgers, I recommend you get the book and you make the recipes that we have, because Mike has cornered the market on the frozen Costco salmon burger. There are none left in the country. Mike has them all in his freezer.
I do have 34 12-ounce packs of them in my freezer. I hate to admit that. But anyway, I want you to know I did cook both Mike Crupain's and Jim Perko's salmon burgers, and I hate to admit it, but they're better than my Costco salmon burgers, but they all are delicious.
Good.
So one of my favorite recipes, I love pasta. Pasta is one of my favorite foods. I love making pasta. I love eating pasta. I love pasta cookbooks. I love everything about pasta. So one of my favorite recipes is this one, which is the carciofi e pepe pasta. It's a really cool dish. So there's a very trendy dish that originates from Rome called cacio e pepe, which is basically just pasta with pepper and cheese. We want to do a twist on it, but still honor the original dish. So carciofi is artichoke. So we take artichokes and puree them in a high-speed blender like a Vitamix with a little bit of olive oil, a little bit of garlic if you want. And you can use that. It comes like a creamy consistency, almost like cheese might or cream. And you mix that into your pasta with the pepper, and it's sort of honors the original dish and has its own unique, wonderful flavor and gets you more artichokes in your diet. One of my favorite foods. Artichokes have fiber. They have inulin, which is a type of sugar that your good gut bacteria eat that helps you feel full. So that's one of my many favorites in the book.
And since it is time for it's 4:30 someplace, it is here. So and I have one bottle of screw top wine, so I'm going to switch from coffee to wine.
Bottom up. I'll have another sip of my water.
So we should talk about coffee for 1 second. Mike's favorite beverage really is coffee. And Mike...
I had to run out and get more I ran out while you were answering, Mike.
So Mike, why don't you tell us what's the right number of cups of coffee to drink a day?
Great question.
So 6 or more 8-ounce cups of coffee, regular coffee, decreases Parkinson's and Alzheimer's disease by over 40% in the epidemiologic studies. They're not randomized studies. By the way, decaf is about half an effect. That same amount of coffee, and by the way, we only advocated if you're a fast metabolizer. What's a fast metabolizer? It's if you have a cup of coffee in a 1 hour period, you don't get a headache, gastric upset, anxiety, or abnormal heartbeats. So if you don't get those, you're a fast metabolizer. 82 or 83% of Americans are. And for those people, they get the benefits of decreasing Parkinson and Alzheimer, about a 23% decrease in type 2 diabetes risk, about between a 20 and 40% decrease in 11 different cancers, including breast cancer. So coffee has some real health benefits. And you have to do it through a filter and without sugar and without cream. Why the filter? Because it filters out one of the acids that actually increases LDL cholesterol. So any paper filter, people often ask, does the Keurig machine, do those K-cups have filters in them? And yes, they do. And yes, they filter out that acid. So in any of those things, it's fine. So this is really a health beverage, if you will.
So you might get the idea from looking at Mike's coffee mug that he does drink a lot of coffee. Looks like it's well used. Mike, how many cups of coffee do you drink a day?
I have about between 6 and 12 of these containers of coffee. And in fact, Carl Peck, who used to be head of the FDA, looked at me while I was on FDA advisory committees for 16 years and ran one. And Carl Peck was there one day while I was drinking coffee, and he said to me, "You must have to get up at night to drink coffee because you have so much, your level would go down during the night and you might wake up from a lack of coffee or get disturbed." And the fact is, yeah, I do drink coffee at night.
Wow. And you still find that you can, sleep through the night with coffee?
Oh, yeah. The only thing you got to have is you got to make sure you have a bathroom nearby.
And this isn't recommended for everyone, but this is what Mike does.
Anyway, but that is one of my habits. So, but this is the wine, so I'm going to start that now, since it is Books on Tap. If it wasn't Books on Tap, I wouldn't have this till much later.
Right, exactly. Well, cheers to that. Speaking of studies, we have an audience question, and someone asked, what are your favorite studies, or what studies did you draw your information from? If you had to pick one study that you found the most fascinating during your research, each of you.
I'm going to pull out the What to Eat When book, and if you look at it, we have in the back 12 pages of about 50 studies per page. I think there actually are over 1,000 references we quote. So we are both, and I shouldn't say this, but we're both science nerds. And so I don't know that we could quote just one study. Mike, do you have one?
I know it's so hard to pick one study. I'll say there's one study that I think is really interesting about eating within a limited window, and it's in fruit flies. And I just like that one because it's in fruit flies. And what happens is usually you keep fruit flies in a little jar and you put sugar on the bottom of the jar so they can eat 24 hours a day. Well, those fruit flies, they age rather quickly. When you only give them access to that meal, that sugary meal, for 12 hours a day, they actually age much more slowly. They fly better, their hearts are healthier, so they actually act more like young fruit flies for a longer period of time because they limit that window. And there's lots of studies like that in all kinds of animals and even in humans that are we talk about in the book that are really interesting to me.
I'm going to give you my favorite. Actually isn't in this book because it just came out maybe 3 or 4 months ago, and maybe even more recently than that. Was a study in JAMA Internal Medicine that reviewed all of the data, and actually, although they didn't quote our book, it came to the same conclusion as our book, that a pescatarian diet with virtually no added sugar, without red meat and without processed red meat, the same things I've told you today, what had the lowest rate of all-cause mortality, meaning it was the healthiest type of diet. So we scooped them by 1.5 years, if you will, by that's exactly what is in the book. And so I'm sorry, there are 1,200 references in the book, so and anyone can get them. So they should enter your contest to get the book, right? I don't know if that's part of the contest books, but if they do, they can get all the references.
That's excellent. Thank you. We have an audience question that I thought was really interesting. What do you recommend, or I guess what recipes or foods do you recommend for people over 70, like someone who is in the more elderly range? Are there special foods or even drinks that you would recommend?
Well, first, 70 is very young.
Well, I agree, but
but I think, anything that's in the book is good for people of all ages.
Yeah, so there is nothing unique. I know there are some characteristics of people over the age of 70. We have less acid in our stomachs, so we digest food a little less well. We have more chance of being low in vitamin D. So you'd want to take a vitamin D supplement. There are more people who take drugs, and so some of those you want, and so you don't want citrus if you're taking a statin drug, which is a common drug. There's some foods that interact with blood pressure pills as well. But excluding those situations, and I don't mean to exclude those are important. And a pharmacist, believe it or not, the pharmacist is the most underutilized, most knowledgeable person in the health system about drug-food interaction. So if you're worried about when you're taking your drugs and food, talk to the pharmacist. So those are important. But other than that, it is any food that is compatible with your lifestyle and your feelings that is in the book, or that we call our yes foods in the book, so you can broaden it out, is totally acceptable.
Okay, great.
Now, let me go and say that's different, maybe, if you actually have coronary artery disease or if you have a cancer. There are differences we point that out. So in active cancer treatment, if you go and get ketotic, you go into what we call autophagy, which protects the cancer. So you don't want to do you don't want to get to ketosis during active cancer treatment. And you don't want to feed, and you certainly don't want to feed the cancer sugar, because the cancers grow on sugar. Conversely, and I'm giving you a whole bunch of rules that are in the book, in the first book as well as in the second book, but I'm giving you a whole bunch of rules. So there are some things you don't want to do. And after cancer survivorship, once you're through with the chemotherapy, then you absolutely want to go into this, because at that time, autophagy is beneficial for you, as is the intermittent fasting program. Now, I didn't. Mike, you want to talk about heart disease? Or you want
I wanted to talk about some recipes.
Okay. Don't let me stop you. Go ahead. Harmony, ask him about some recipes.
What's another recipe? Let us know. We want to know.
Well, I think you had some, I heard you were interested in. Was there a trout with krauty recipe you wanted to know about? Perhaps
Yeah.
you got a picture of?
Well, my favorites personally were the trout with the krauty, and then also the snow pea soup, which is so beautiful. The green soup with the olive oil. I absolutely love that page and that photo. But we can start with the trout.
Yeah, so it's actually an ocean trout that we make this with. That's another one of Mike's favorite foods, a steelhead trout, which is actually very closely related to the salmon. Can't quite tell.
And the reason it's a favorite food is it is one of the two fish, salmon and ocean trout, that are predictable in having the healthy omega-3 fats. When the USDA looks at fats in fish, we've farm raised and done so much with fish that the only fish with predictable omega-3s in them, in addition to sardines and anchovies, are in fact salmon and ocean trout.
Yep. So this recipe is really easy. You can make it easy, or you can make it hard. Like I love cooking a whole fish, and there's actually a place near me that sells these steelhead trouts. So I get the whole fish and I stuff it with the sauerkraut. You can buy sauerkraut already made. Sauerkraut, if you eat it raw, is a great source of probiotics and prebiotic fiber. You mix the sauerkraut with some carrots and some seasonings that you're interested in, stuff them in the fish, and then it just the fattiness and the sort of richness of that fish pairs well with the sauerkraut. You can also make your own sauerkraut. We don't put the recipe in the book, but this weekend I went to the farmer's market and I bought this cabbage the size of my head, and I'm looking forward to turning it into sauerkraut because I don't know what else to do with such a large cabbage.
I should say, and Harmony, I want to make one point. The pictures in the book, I want to thank National Geographic because because Mike and Jim and I do a little bit hammered on National Geo to make the pictures the real representation of the food and to make them, and they're beautiful pictures because they are the food being cooked exactly as we designed it.
Yeah, and the pictures are so important in a cookbook, right? Because that's a lot of people buy cookbooks for the pictures. I have hundreds of cookbooks. I like looking at the pictures. And they also, you eat with your eyes first. So you want the food to look beautiful, and it helps when you're making a recipe if you see what it looks like. So on the screen now you have one of your other favorites from the book, which is the snap pea soup. And this is a really simple dish. I love cooking, obviously, in season and with things I get from the farmer's market. And snap peas come in season in the spring. And actually, this recipe was inspired by something I learned when I was working in one of David Boulet's kitchens when I was in medical school. And basically, it's super simple. You take the snap peas and you blanch them briefly, and then you put them again into your high-speed blender with some ice, and you puree it. And when you do it in that Vitamix type blender, and you just blanch them very briefly, and then basically add the ice that's cooling them down, you can keep that vibrant color that you see in this picture, and you get that pure flavor of the snap peas. Now you can also add, in this recipe, we added avocado. So it made it a little bit richer. Sometimes people like to add a cream to their soup. You can add a healthy fat like avocado, that's great. And then this particular one, I also have optional, you could add some crab to it to really kick it up if you want, but it's good sort of just as the snap peas by themselves, the snap peas and the avocado by itself, or you can add something else into it you want. Also here, I put on the top a little bit of mint oil, which again, you could just put a little bit of olive oil and chop up a little mint, or in this case, it's sort of whizzed up some olive oil and mint together to make that emulsion to add something with a little more spring flavor. Peas and mint go together really well.
I should also mention, Michael, that in the recipe section of the book, we have all the alternatives. So, for example, farro with leftover pasta, you could have it with leftover pesto. You could have it with any of the 3 pestos. But you also can have it with, you can add veggies, you can add other things to it. And we talk about that to make it a full meal.
Yeah, we have a lot of pesto recipes in the book. I'm really into pestos. And another thing we're really interested in the book is using the whole vegetable. So, for example, we have a recipe for a carrot top pesto. Most people throw the tops of carrots away, the green frond part, but they're actually really delicious and have the nutrients that a carrot has. And so they're great sort of as a dip for vegetables or a spread, or on pasta
or with
or
farro. I had it with farro for my real lunch today. I didn't have it with the salmon burgers. You notice I saved that. So Jim and I made it for Jim Perko, the third author, and I made it for my lunch, if you will, a farro with leftover carrot top pesto and some veggies.
Yeah, actually, the leftover pesto farro leftover pesto recipe came about because writing a cookbook is really hard, and you need to come up with a lot of recipes. And I had made one of the recipes is really another cool one is this roasted kohlrabi with a kohlrabi top pesto, right? So actually, I think the kohlrabi you can roast some of it, you can have some of it raw. It has a bunch of different ways, and then you toss it with this kohlrabi pesto. But the kohlrabi I bought that day had lots and lots of leaves, so it had way more pesto than you needed for the rest of the dish. And so I made some farro and threw in the kohlrabi pesto. I was like, oh, this is fantastic. You can do this with any pesto.
So these are pestos made without cheese. And in fact, all the pestos are made without cheese, usually with walnuts and basil, etc., and pecans, some of them. And they're remarkably great dishes.
Yeah, technically they're more of a pesto, I think, of the French version, which has no cheese, but we call them pesto.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite aspects of the book was like the pestos, the sauces, and the creams, like the cremas you guys had. I loved that section. I think it was, I forget, 46 or 47 in the 40s somewhere, but there was a bunch of like cauliflower cream and there's artichoke cream.
Those Mike made. And Mike, tell how you started to make those. Those are really inventions of yours.
Yeah, well, it started with the artichoke one that I mentioned before. Actually, I mean, the real story is I was in the grocery store and I saw this little jar of carciofi cream, it was called, from Italy, and this tiny little jar was like $15 or something. I said, "Oh, that's kind of expensive. I bet you I can make something as good as this at home." So I did. And then that kind of led me on.
Well, you took canned artichoke or
simple
jar of artichokes, hearts of artichokes, and you made it with olive oil, extra virgin olive oil.
Yeah, a little garlic if you want.
It's simple as heck to make, as long as you got a Vitamix or something that's a high-speed blender, and it is magnificent.
Yeah.
You will, when you get to taste this, you will not believe you haven't had it before in your life.
Yeah, it's really good, and we've made other ones.
Where have I been all my life? It's almost as good as great sex, Harmony.
Well, there's also others in the book, as you mentioned. There's the cauliflower version. There's a carrot version. There's a corn version. The corn one's actually really, really cool. It gets pretty thick, and I kind of like it as a dessert in a weird way because it has some sweetness from the corn, but it's great that we use in some other recipes in the book. So you could do it with any vegetable. Once you get the technique, you could do it with onions. You could do it with fennel. You could do it with anything you want, really.
That's
Have
great.
you done it with onions? Let me ask you, have you done it with onions? I've never done it with onions. Isn't that?
Yeah, I tried it with onions. I don't love onions all that much, but you would cook the onions. You caramelize them first.
You caramelize them first, so they're sweet. Eh?
Yeah. So I made it, and I was like, "Oh, this is too sweet for me."
I am going to try that tonight because that's something I haven't tried before.
I haven't done that one either. Actually, I didn't think about caramelizing. That's a good idea. But anyway, you guys, unfortunately, we are out of time. I've had so much fun, but thank you so much for being here. I've learned so much, and I'm sure the audience has as well. And I highly recommend that everyone pick up this fabulous cookbook that I have, and I'm very excited to cook with. So I just wanted to thank you guys again for coming. And if there's anything that you need from us, just let us know. And are there any closing remarks you have?
I just wanted to say thank you to Publishers Weekly and Books on Tap. And I'm enjoying it. I mean, I normally don't do this at 4:30 in the afternoon on a weekday. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been really fun, and hope to talk to you again.
You too. See you guys later.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Well, that was wonderful. The next Books on Tap live event is next Wednesday, November 4th, with Rose Dabo, who will be discussing their new Gothic fantasy YA novel called What Big Teeth. Sign up to receive a reminder of the event at publishersweekly.com/booksontap live. And I hope to see you Thank you so much for joining us. The doctors were great, and have a great evening.